Welcome to another edition of Who's Better Baseball, the podcast where we answer a simple question on each show. Who's better at baseball? I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein, managing editor at justbaseball.com. I have Elijah Evans with me today, and we're going to look at this crazy NL wildcard race. There's technically still 5 teams vying for the last 2 spots. We're going to take the Phillies, sort of set them aside. I think at this point, they're sitting 3.5 games up. Feels like the Phillies are going to grab that top spot, really. So the question then becomes, which of these other 5 teams is going to make the playoffs? And once there, which of these teams can actually make a run? Because you look at the American League, and I feel like any team that makes the playoffs outside of the Twins, ironically enough, but even then they have good pitching, like any team can make a run. In the NL, I don't know if that's the case, but we'll see as we kind of go through the exercise today. I want to start off doing schedule talk. Everyone loves it. There's 2 weeks left. You can actually really get a sense of which of these teams has the best chance based on who they're playing down the stretch. So we'll begin with the Arizona Diamondbacks. They are sitting right now. If you look at the standings, you got, as I said, the Phillies 3.5 games up. The D-backs a half game up on the Cubs and the Marlins, who are currently tied for that 3rd spot. Arizona's got the Giants 2 games this week, 3 games versus the Yankees, 3 games versus your White Sox, Elijah, and 3 versus the Astros. Are they going to be able to get through it? Because I look at the Giants series, that's going to be, if the Giants get swept in that series, they're probably out of it. So they're going to be fighting. The Yankees have been playing good baseball. The Astros, is that last series going to matter to them, I guess is the question. I feel like the White Sox is the one layup, but it's not the easiest of schedules down the stretch.
Yeah, no, it's not easy. It's going to be a little interesting to see kind of where those teams are at in terms of their competitiveness. Like you said, the Giants right now are still in striking position, so they're still at full on. It's a divisional matchup. I mean, that's already, no matter what this time of year, that's going to be a hard matchup for them. And then, like you said, the Yankees are not playing for anything necessarily, but they're also playing better baseball of late, and they're still the Yankees, and I still think they want to finish above 500, and they want to go into next year with more momentum on their side. And then obviously Houston, like in that AL wildcard, the AL divisional race in the West, and then also the wild card race, which goes side by side with it. Houston needs every win they can get, so there's a chance Houston is clinched by then, and they're easing up a little bit. But there's a real chance that Houston hasn't clinched that division until the last weekend of the season. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, that's not an easy stretch for Arizona, but Arizona is also playing good baseball of late. They've won 3 in a row. They swept this weekend. They're 6 of their last 10. So they're not playing great, but they're playing better than they were in that middle of the season stretch where they really started to tail off a little bit. And now they kind of look more like the team that they did earlier in the season, as opposed to how they did, July and August.
Yeah, and honestly, we're going to get to who can make the deepest run. I feel like Arizona might be the strongest team out of this whole group. So we'll kind of circle back to that. The Cubs, it seemed for a second like they had a chance to run down the Brewers in that division. And now the Brewers are kind of pulled away a bit because the Cubs have really fallen back down to earth. They've only won 2 of their last 10. And now they have a pretty light schedule, you would think. But, I mean, they got to start winning these games, particularly what's right in front of them. 3 against the Pirates, 3 against the Rockies this week. Then you have 3 against the Braves, a team that has everything pretty much sewn up at this point. And then they close the season against the Brewers. I'm sure if the Brewers had an opportunity to knock the Cubs out of the playoffs, even if they have it all sewn up, they're going to want to do that. So this is a huge week for the Cubs to get on solid ground heading into what's going to be a tough final week of the season. Because even if the Braves are playing at 70%, you can still lose to the Braves, of course.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a tough stretch, and I mean they really just need to win this week. If the Cubs, they were really solidly in that second wild card spot for a while,
Yeah.
which everybody, the last few weeks they've been pretty stable in that spot. But you're starting to see some of their holes show in the last week, and you're seeing a team that come playoff time, right? Like if Justin Steele has a bad start, where do you go from there? I mean, really, it's Stroman is a bullpen guy for them now. I think maybe he's able to go 3-4 inning chunks by the playoffs, but they didn't have time to build him back up coming off his injury. So he's kind of pitching in this utility bullpen role. And then Steele has been excellent. He's a top 3 Cy Young candidate. He's been great, but he just got beat up by the Diamondbacks this week. And he gave up 6 runs on 2 big home runs. And if he has to start like that to start off a series, where do the Cubs go from there? I mean, really, the
Yeah.
pitching is not at the level that a lot of these other teams are, and just in general, compared to some of the playoff teams they're going to be facing. If you look at the Braves and you look at the Phillies and even the Dodgers who are beat up, the Cubs pitching just isn't quite there in the rotation. Their bullpen's been great for the most part, the last few months especially, but I don't quite see how this team can stack up pitching wise in a playoff series without Stroman being one of those starters. And it's really going to come down to some of, Jordan Wicks. Can Jordan Wicks as a rookie be a huge piece for them come playoff time? Like maybe he's a really talented pitcher and he's looked good in a few of his starts so far. But at the same time, that's putting a lot on some of these younger, less proven pitchers behind Steele to really step it up. So I think for the Cubs to make it, they've got to go 5-1 this week. Is that too ambitious? I mean, I think they have to at least 4-2 this week. But I think knowing the Brewers series to end the season, like you said, that's no matter what the situation with the division is, the Brewers are going to want to beat the Cubs that weekend. And the Brewers are playing better baseball than the Cubs in the last few weeks. So I think the Cubs really need to take advantage of this Pittsburgh and Colorado week right now in order to make it. If they want to hold on to one of those spots.
I think with all these teams, you're at a point where you can't get swept in any series. That's going to effectively not get out of the playoffs, honestly. And with 4 series left for all these teams, for the most part, I mean, like the D-backs have a 2-game series, so you can sweep that. But I think you got to win like 3 of the final 4 series if you want to be in the mix. And who knows? We'll see how these teams end up faring down the stretch. There's not a lot of head-to-head between the wild card bubble teams anymore. There's the Diamondbacks and the Giants this week, but there's now everyone's kind of playing other teams. So we'll see. I mean, there's a chance that 3 of these teams all completely go on really great runs down the stretch, and it could come down to just the final couple games who can win out here. The Reds are a team that has a really light schedule. I feel like it's Twins, which, okay, that might be tougher. But then Pirates, Guardians, Cardinals close out their season. In a lot of ways, and we'll get to it more, as we kind of close this out on who can make the deepest run. But I don't know if the Reds can make a deep run. But if they make the playoffs, it's all gravy for this team. It already kind of is.
Yeah.
I feel like it's right in front of them to steal one of these spots.
I think anything this team does this year come playoff time is already a huge success and a year ahead of their schedule. Like we've talked about many times this year. I mean, the Reds they weren't supposed to be a playoff team this year. They weren't supposed to be close to a playoff team. They were supposed to have young players that started to show promise, but they have a roster filled with rookies that is up there with all these other really talented teams right now and is competing with the best of them. And they're missing half of their pitching. I mean, Ashcraft has been hurt for the last month, and it doesn't seem like I don't know if he's back soon. But he's been hurt. Hunter Green is back now and settling in well, but Lodolo's been hurt the majority of the year. I mean, they haven't had significant pitching. I mean, people were saying, they could have been a team that added pitching at the deadline and they chose not to, and they chose to, keep it focused on their future and everything, which is great. And I think that was ultimately the right decision for the Reds because I don't know if they go far this year, but them even being where they are right now is already an achievement for them. And I think you're right. If they can win 1 or 2 of these Twins games this week, they could easily go on a run against, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and St. Louis. And St. Louis is an interesting example there to finish the season. Like we said about divisional things, the Cardinals would love nothing less than to knock the Reds out. So even with the Cardinals being totally out of it, I could see a world where the Cardinals turn it on and win that series to finish the season against the Reds. And, because it's one of their divisional teams. But at the same time, like you said, the Reds have it. They have an opportunity here for sure to take it. And it's really just going to come down to if their pitching can hold up. And I'm curious to see, where it takes them because I don't know how much I believe in the pitching right now. But I also think the same can be said for every team. And the Reds have the type of offense that if it gets hot, they can really just click on all cylinders.
It can. And speaking off of 2 things you said there, 1, a red hot offense, 2, team going up against a divisional opponent. The Marlins just had a ridiculous weekend against the Braves. They outscored them 36-13, scored 16 runs on Sunday. They have 6 games of their final 12 against the New York Mets. And you would think that would be a good thing. But baseball's so weird that I would not be surprised if they went from sweeping the Braves to losing a series against the Mets because that's just how things work out. I look at this Marlins team and I think they are, of all these teams, they're the team that I feel like it would be the most fun to see them make it because it's just twice in their franchise history, plus the 2020 season, that they've made the playoffs. They have this lineup now that is suddenly awesome, and they still got a couple of arms you'd like. I think the big question down the stretch with them is Yuri Perez going to be available to pitch in the postseason? Because they seem to have lost Sandy now for the year, I think.
Yep.
And if it's just Jesus Luzardo and Braxton Garrett, they might be a little bit thin come the playoffs. But they're scheduled. They got, like I said, they got this one against the Mets. They play the Brewers. They play the Mets again, and they finish it off against the Pirates. The schedule's there for them as well to grab one of these spots, and they have one right now, tie with the Cubs in that third wild card spot.
Yeah, no, I think they have the opportunity to, and they're coming off to the hottest team right now. I mean, this series this weekend definitely boosted their chances. But like you said, I mean, it's really it ultimately comes down to Luzardo and Yuri. And if those two can come into the playoffs and be able to pitch without much restriction and pitch at the peak of their abilities, that's a team that could mess around and make some noise. I really do believe that. And I don't believe their offense as much as I believe the offense from some of these other teams. And that's kind of where I'm a little hesitant with the Marlins. You being somebody who watches them in division, I mean, their offense has not been good for large parts of the season. They've had many times this season where their offense has just been bad. But it looks good right now. So at the end of the day, if you can ride those two young pitchers and some of their other arms, and the offense can do its job, who knows? I could see a world where they compete and they have they make a run. But I'm interested to see how the pitching shakes out. And as much as Sandy has not been Sandy this year, and he hasn't been the Cy Young Sandy, I still want that guy pitching in the first game of a playoff series 10 times out of 10, and he won't be able to. So, I mean, can Luzardo fill those shoes? He's had games this season where he's looked like he truly can. And he's also had games this season where he's looked like he's just a little shaky and he's not quite there yet. So I'm really interested to see how that shakes out. And I think that they are right in position to do it. But I need to see a little bit of continued success from that offense to really believe that they can make noise, because I do think that as while they're pitching is a little more interesting, in the upside of their pitching is more interesting than some of these other teams. I'm not sure their offense can hang with some of the other wild card teams.
Yeah, I look at them and I think that Yuri is the biggest question mark to me. Like, are they going to because he's already, I think, 50 innings above his limit, or not his limit, but his previous career high. So it's just, how much are you willing to push him? Because without Yuri, I just don't see them making a run. But I also could see them still making the playoffs, which would be, important to that franchise. And look, with a rise, Jazz, now the additions of Berger and Bell, like there's enough of an offense where they can not only make the playoffs, but I think win a wild card series. I hesitate to think that any of these teams could actually win a divisional round matchup. Against the Dodgers or the Braves. Speaking of the Dodgers, the Giants, we haven't spent too much time on them. They're 2 games back right now. And down the stretch, they got these 2 against Arizona to start the week. That's certainly not easy. 4 against the Dodgers to close the week. 3 versus the Padres next week. So that's not an easy series. And then 3 versus the Dodgers. I just don't see the Giants making the playoffs at this point. I just can't.
Yeah, I can't see it either. I've been kind of not on that wave for a few weeks now. I just don't think the roster is there. I think they've tried to piece together a rotation behind Webb and Cobb all year, and it just hasn't come together really. And they've continued to their bullpen's been solid. They've continued to bring in a lot of their young players on the offensive side, but they don't have a bat that scares you. I don't think they have. They have a lot of pieces who have been solid, and they just have a well-rounded veteran-based roster for the most part with a few young good players. But there's nobody on that lineup that you're scared of. And there's nobody in that rotation behind. I mean, there's a chance that Logan Webb and Alex Cobb can really, hunker down. And if they both give ace level performances the next few starts each, and they probably both have 2 more starts, maybe 3 more starts at most each. So maybe those 2 really just turn it on and they just mow down some Dodgers lineups. But I don't see it. I think the Giants are I didn't think they were even going to be in this spot coming into the year. So the fact that they've maintained, the middle of the pack in the NL West pretty much the majority of the year and have been competitive and been, in a playoff position many times this year is impressive to me. But I don't see them making it. And I don't see if they were to make it, I don't see how they would make a run really. I think you could say like in a wild card series, sure, Webb and Cobb could win you a wild card series maybe. So maybe if they slip into that 6 seed, like I could see the Giants pushing the Brewers maybe. That wouldn't shock me honestly, but I just don't see them making the playoffs. So I don't think it's going to come down to if they can compete or not, because I just don't think they can catch up with some of these other teams right now.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And the funny thing is, like you kind of mentioned there, like Webb and Cobb, if we're just looking at the top two for a wild card series, like Webb and Cobb might be the best. I'd maybe say the D-backs with Gallen and Kelly,
Yeah.
potentially Luzardo and Yuri, but like that could actually be a team that can win a wild card series. What I'm wondering here is, can any of these teams win a divisional series? And that's where I think it gets a little bit tough. Before we get to that, though, you have to pick two. Okay, who are the two teams that make the playoffs behind the Phillies?
The first one I'm taking is Arizona. I think they're the best well-rounded team, and I think they've showed that at many points this year. And they've had their dips where they've fallen out of that playoff spot, but ultimately they were winning the NL West for a while earlier this year before the Dodgers got into their groove fully, and they had a really bad middle of the season. But I think Arizona is the best team of this group. The next one, I have no idea. This is probably my White Sox fan bias talking, but I'm not going to go with the Cubs. I don't think their pitching is there. I don't see it, and they're really cold right now, and they need to snap out of it. They would need to get in a situation where they win a few straight, and I'm not sure I see it. I think I'm gonna go with the Marlins. I can't believe I'm saying that, and I would never have said that a few months ago if some of you asked me who was going to be in the playoffs. But I just I don't know. I kind of feel it. I think you can make a case for any of the Cubs, the Marlins, Cincinnati. That's the whole point of this episode. Is this is crazy? I mean, it really could go any way. But I think right now I'll go with the 5 seed Diamondbacks and the 6 seed Marlins.
I think that I was caught between the Marlins and the Reds, which is funny because I think
Yeah,
the Cubs, in some ways, are a better team than both of those.
yeah, I
But
agree.
I just look at the schedule and the way they've been playing, and like even the Rockies have been playing some sneaky good baseball lately. So that's like one of the easy series the Cubs have, but they played spoiler over the weekend. You know, having to face the Braves and a Brewers team, I think will want to beat them. I question if the Cubs can make it. I'll say the Reds because I think their schedule is just that easy. Um, maybe this is my Mets fan bias thinking that they're actually going to take some games from this Marlins team. They are 5-2 against the Marlins this year. But I'll go D-backs Reds. But I honestly think that when it comes to what team can make a run, I feel like the Diamondbacks are the only team that could make a run to the NLCS. And I don't think any of these wild card teams outside of the Phillies, who we're not really talking about on this show, can make it to the World Series. But, in a 5-game series, if you win the first couple of games, now the problem is, I guess depending on how the bracket works, I'm figuring, let's just say that the D-backs are in that, what they'd be the 5 seed. So they'd have to play the Phillies anyway. All right. So let's just say they get past the Phillies. Then they're going up against what, the Dodgers?
No, the Braves. It would be assuming that the Brewers beat the 6. It would be the Braves that the 4-5 faces.
Okay.
So I don't know if I can never remember if it reseeds or not based
No,
on the
I don't think
outcome,
it
but I
does.
don't
Yeah,
think
you're
it
right.
does. So the 4-5 plays the 1. So that's the issue with the Diamondbacks. I think the Diamondbacks in the 6 seed, I think the Diamondbacks can make a run. So it's weird because you have to consider, is it even better to be a higher seed? Because yes, like this is being an away team at the Phillies and then going to the Braves a better route than being an
No,
away team at the Brewers, then going to the Dodgers? I would way rather be the 6 seed, which is such a
no.
weird position to be in because you're not going to lose games and it's way too tight of a race to consider, whether you want to be the 5 or the 6. So you have to go for it. But if you're the 5, if Arizona's the 5, they're screwed. I don't see a world where anybody gets past the Phillies and the Braves. Because if you somehow beat the Phillies, I think there's no way you're beating the Braves, and chances are any team in that spot loses to the Phillies. So it's a really hard position. I would way rather be the 6 seed. And I think, weirdly enough, I think there's a world where a 6 seed Marlins could make a little bit of a run. I don't, that sounds insane to say out
Dude,
loud, but
it's not
I don't
because
know. I don't
it,
know.
I don't know what to do with 2020, but I'll tell you, someone who's
Yeah,
grown up in South Florida, I've heard it my whole life. Hey, whenever the Marlins make the playoffs, they win the World Series. That was always the thing. And
right.
2020 kind of ruined that, but it also kind of didn't because no one
It
really
was
takes
also
it
a fake
seriously.
year. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
so the Marlins are this team that can get this really weird like magic in them and go on a little run. Like you're right. I think that 6 seed is the interesting one because yeah, you could see a world where all right, for whatever reason, Soler and Berger hit big home runs, and all of a sudden they end up beating the Brewers in 2 games, kind of shocking
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah,
Then they go up against a Dodgers team that has a way thinner rotation than they would have in years past. And again, somehow you steal it or you
yeah.
get to a point where you have Jesus Luzardo on the mound in a game 4 or
Right.
game 5 or something. And like all of a sudden it just starts to build momentum. I still can't see a world where it's not the Braves, the Phillies, or the Dodgers representing the National League in the
Yeah,
World Series. I just can't see it. But
yeah.
last year,
I
we
agree.
might have said I can't see a world where it's not the Dodgers, the Braves, or the Mets
Yeah.
representing, and none of them made it to the NLCS.
Yep.
So that's the beauty of the playoffs. Anything can happen,
It's super hard to gauge. It's
but
just yeah.
it's it's tough. I think based on the pitching, it still feels like the Diamondbacks with Gallen, Kelly. I feel like, and just the overall team they have I think they're the best wild card team outside of the Phillies.
I
But
I agree, but I also I mean, who knows? The Reds, the Cubs. I mean, there's really there's a chance any of these teams does it. Even the Giants. Even I mean, I'm not saying I'm not putting this out there saying I believe this, but the Padres aren't out yet. I mean, seriously, that's how crazy this year has been. Would I be shocked to see the Padres win like 5 in a row and be within a few games? I wouldn't be shocked. I know that's crazy, and I know
I
everybody's like completely done on the Padres. I know. I'm not saying that's going to happen at all, but there's a world, right? Like this has been this wild card race in the
they'd have
National
to
League this
win
year.
out. I
It's
mean, it's tough because I'm looking at
yeah. What are they back? It's 5 back, 6 back.
there's 6 back with like 12 to play. I mean,
It's unlikely, right? But this wild card race this year has been my point being this wild card race has been nothing but chaos and nothing but somewhat mediocre chaos. And that's in a way it's fun, but it's funny because I don't think any of these teams are great. Like none of these are great teams. They're all playing well, and a lot of them have had really impressive runs to get themselves in position to make this playoff push. But are any of these teams like you look at them and say that's a great baseball team? Not really. I think the
yeah.
Diamondbacks even are a little bit early. I think everybody was thinking next year was really going to be the big year for the Diamondbacks. So I think they're a little early. I think the Reds are a little early. I think the Marlins are a little unbalanced. I think the Cubs are not necessarily early, but they just don't really have the pitching. It's interesting to look at. It's not like the American League, like you said earlier. The American League is 7 really good baseball teams for 6 spots, and any of those 7 teams, whichever make it, could compete. And with the Twins being the worst of the 7, frankly. So it's not the same thing. The National League is the Braves are 1, the Dodgers are 2, and everybody else is behind them. And I think you can make a case the Phillies are clearly 3. I think the Phillies and Brewers are in the similar tier. And then beyond that, it's a lot of teams that are all in the same area as each other, but none are great and none are near the American League. I'm going on a tangent here, but like when you look at the Mariners, right? The Mariners are outside the playoffs looking in right now. Can the Mariners beat the 1 seed Orioles in the playoff series? 100%. 100%. Can any of these wildcard teams even stack up with the Braves? Probably not. But then again, you never know.
Last year we didn't think the Phillies stood a chance and they beat the Braves, but it feels like this is like the Braves from June on last year when Michael Harris,
Yeah.
kind of became the everyday center fielder and everything. They were the team they've been for 162 this year. It feels like the Braves are just this juggernaut that should absolutely represent the National League in the World Series. But you never know. We could be talking about the Marlins or the D-backs because that's what happens in baseball. I think the
Yep.
most interesting thing that we kind of landed on through this episode today is I think you're right. That 6 spot in the wild card is it's kind of where you want to be,
Yep.
and you have so many teams that have to keep on trying to win just to make the playoffs. And hell, that could all be decided by tiebreakers when it's all
Yeah,
said and done.
exactly. There's a world where 3 teams finish with the exact same record at the end of the season. I mean, it's that close. It's not like
Four teams
it's four
could,
teams, right?
and
There's
one
a
team
world
could
where
just be
four
out.
teams, yeah. Well, 2 teams would be out in that situation
Oh
if
yeah,
four
yeah,
teams
you're
are tied.
right. Yeah.
So it's, I mean, it could, this is going to get crazy. And I'm sure we're going to do another episode on the playoff picture in the next week and a half. But this could go many different directions. And I think there's going to be some really upset fans and there's going to be some really happy fans. And ultimately, I don't think any of those fans are going to get to watch more than one series of the playoffs. But with that said, you never know. And I think whoever's in that 6 seed, all I'll say is I think I might be taking whoever's in that 6 seed in the first round because I think there's a world where Milwaukee just isn't that great. I don't know if I believe Milwaukee. They've played good baseball, but the pitching staff is great there. But I could see a world where Milwaukee's offense just completely stagnates and they score 1 run a game in the playoffs. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I think any of these teams could do it. I'm riding with Arizona over the other 3 right now, just because I think their roster is the most complete. But any of these teams that's still in it, aside from the Giants, personally, in my opinion, could really make the playoffs and be competitive in the first round.
It's going to be a thrilling race over these final 2 weeks. We'll see how it all shakes out. Make sure you continue to stay tuned to Who's Better as we will cover the race on both sides. Also, check out the written articles we have at justbaseball.com. I know we're going to have power rankings this week on the different starting rotations in the playoffs, American League and National League. So there's going to be some fun stories to take a look at. Again, make sure you check out all the stuff we have coming your way at justbaseball.com.